Yeah, welcome everyone to productbooklab.com. We meet here once a month to discuss a book related to product management. And today we're going to discuss Build What Matters with Rajesh. So Rajesh is also joining us in the call. For the new ones that are joining us, feel free to ask questions, write comment, feedback about the book through the hour. Just make sure to introduce yourself, to respect if someone else is speaking. But yeah, let's make it a discussion. And yeah, welcome, Rajesh. Thank you again for your time and for joining us. Maybe we're going to start with you giving us a brief intro about yourself, the book.
Yeah, for sure. Carlos, thank you so much for having me and for everyone for joining. Super high level kind of background for, those who haven't kind of gotten into the book at deep levels. I'm an engineer turned MBA turned product guy. I've been doing product for more than 15 years now. I'm down here in Austin, Texas, and I grew up in Dallas. So I went to college at UT, did electrical engineering, and then I went to go work at Accenture for 5 years after college. Started as a software engineer and architect, but was sort of drawn to the business side of things. And so I wanted to be a little bit closer to our clients, stepped into a business analyst role, working with our government clients to figure out why they were asking us to build these sort of like custom software solutions for their citizens. And that was kind of my first step into product. Didn't think consulting was the right long-term path for me. So I went to business school up at Michigan Ross, and I used that to transition into the world of startups. So my first year, I worked for a student-run company in the travel space that got acquired after graduation. And then second year, I started a company in the sort of energy efficiency, sustainability space with a classmate. And our first product was this Facebook app that lets you compare your energy usage to friends and family. And so I spent about 1.5 years trying to sell that to utility companies and home energy professionals. And then I got engaged and realized I needed a salary. And so moved out to Washington, D.C. and joined a growth stage startup called Opower, who was doing something very similar in the energy efficiency space. Actually, our product was international. So if you've ever seen a report that shows how your energy usage compares to your neighbors, that was the core Opower product and that I worked on. And we went public about 7 years ago, so kind of exciting times to see the growth stage of that company. That was my first step into the world of product management, kind of officially, my first title as a product manager. And that was where I met Ben Foster, who's my co-author. He was the head of product and design when I was there. Kind of what I learned at Opower was a lot of people responded to our messages because they cared more about the financial savings of reducing their energy usage more so than the environmental benefits. And so I started doing some research and found out about the kind of financial wellness crisis that was brewing here in America. So I went to a fintech company in DC as well as a senior PM. We got acquired about 1 year after I joined by one of our investors. So I ran the product team after the acquisition. And then the company that bought us is a company called Morningstar out in Chicago. They asked me to come out there and take over kind of a overall, our product was distributed as an employee benefit. So it was sort of a director of workplace products, added a couple of robo-advisors on top of the financial wellness product suite. And that was probably a $40 million portfolio with a team of about 20 people. So product managers, product operations, technical project managers. And I had a great time at Morningstar, but I missed the world of startups. And so I started advising on the side and I really enjoyed that. And so when we moved to Austin a few years ago to be closer to friends and family, I reached back out to Ben. Mm-hmm. Ben, in the meantime, had basically retired the day of the Opower IPO and started doing some ad hoc coaching and advisory work. And so when I reached out, it happened to be good timing. So he was thinking about joining one of his clients as chief product officer, which he ended up doing. And then I took over this practice about 3.5 years ago. So, collectively over the past 7 years, we've worked with about 75 product teams. And there's kind of 2 big buckets that we help with. One is vision and strategy. Where's the product going? How are you going to get there? Why is your product going to win in the market? And then the second is product team development. So, we have a hiring service, but kind of coaching is one of the big things we do. So that's everyone from product executives to individual product managers, especially at startups, to entire product teams with some of our larger clients. And the book was sort of a genesis of, as you might imagine, we started identifying a lot of patterns from our own experiences. Yeah. And then also having worked with, at that time, it was probably about 50 companies or something. And so we packaged all of our lessons learned and sort of best practices into the vision-led product management framework. So we rolled that out a couple of years ago. And then last year decided to write the book, Build What Matters, to sort of share a lot more stories and details and some tactical advice on how to actually apply, the framework framework at your own organization. And so, the context here was we didn't want this to read like a textbook, which is why, every chapter we had the sort of worksheets and the digital resources that went along, which is like, if you wanted to try any of the concepts out, we have the templates and examples to kind of give it a shot. So that's super high level on sort of my background and the context behind why we wrote the book.
Nice, thank you. Yeah, indeed. I really like the book. I think the structure and also, what I found, I think, unique was indeed all the links at the end, right? I downloaded already some of the spreadsheets and the templates, because I think usually when you would read other books was like, okay, you get the big idea, but then especially if you are starting, right, then you struggle to, okay, so what do I do now, right? And I think having the template, the examples, I also like these sort of like stories in each chapter, right, on how you guys saw it in a different company. So yeah, very, very nice. Also, surprised with how many topics you included, right? I think at the end there is also even how you hire the first PM, the second PM. I think that one first time I see that. Very, very nice book. I really enjoy it. I don't know if someone has any initial questions, comments, feedback that they would like to share from the book, or I think in general, right? Maybe for the ones that are still reading or haven't finished reading it. The book is more or less structured. I will read part 1, making product management work, right? I think you guys go over why you think product is not working, present a solution. And then I think part 2 is like the main part, right? Creating a product vision and a strategy, how do you define the outcome? How do you have the strategy behind it? And then, of course, how do you deploy the strategy? And then part 3, bringing the vision-led product management to your company, indeed, right? How do you land it into your team, to your company? I don't know if someone has, again, questions, comments, feedback about the book, or the topic. I think is quite broad as well.
In case it's helpful, Carlos, I also have an exercise I do when I'm explaining the concept of vision-led product management. If y'all are interested in doing it, it takes like 2 or 3 minutes, and it's different from what we talk about in the book, but I'm also happy to start with any questions and we can come back to that later.
Okay. Yeah. Are there any questions? Otherwise, indeed, I think it might be nice to get a discussion going if we do the exercise.
Let's do the exercise.
Okay. All right, cool. So I'm going to pull up a deck. I'm actually doing a talk right after this on something else, but this is actually a slide from the deck, and this is a section. Carlos, do you think I can share my screen?
Yes, Timur, I think you need to share the...
Yes, let me try to find the way. You should be able to share screen now.
Yes, okay, cool. All right. Can you all see the deck over here?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I'm gonna just make my Zoom window again so I can see your faces. Okay, so this activity actually either requires you to come off a video and raise your hand, or you could use the Zoom reaction buttons if you know how to do that, the thumbs up or the thumbs down. I'm gonna ask a series of questions basically, so that's the activity. You don't have to come off camera if you don't want to, but okay, so I already talked to you all about sort of the theory behind, or sort of like why we wrote this book. Like, let me give the overview here, right? So in order to do this exercise, I'm going to ask you guys for a minute to sort of imagine that you are here in Austin, Texas with me. We have a lot of really good barbecue we're well known for. We have an American football team that's not so good. I went to college at UT, so I can talk a little smack about them. And our weather is usually pretty nice. It's usually pretty warm. In the summer, it gets hot. So imagine that we're all standing in downtown Austin. This is what it looks like. And a bus pulls up. How many of you would get onto that bus if you had no idea where it was going? Okay, no one. This is a pretty common reaction, right? No one's going to do that. Let me change the question for you for a minute. What if we were in Austin, Texas, and I told you that the bus was going to San Francisco, California? How many of you would want to get onto that bus? Yes, okay, I see some thumbs. All right, some thumbs up, some thumbs down. That's okay. All right, cool. Okay, I'm going to ask a different question now. What if we were in Austin, Texas, and I told you it was going to our nation's capital, Washington, D.C.? How many of you would want to get onto that bus? Yes. All right. Some different. All right. I see some different thumbs up. More people, different people. Okay. Okay. That's great. That's great. All right. I'm going to complicate this with two more questions. What if I told you that the trip from Austin to San Francisco was going to be an outdoor adventure, and every night we were going to stop at a national park and go camping and hiking, and you were going to get to see all the beauty of America? How many of you would want to get onto that bus? All right. Oh, I saw a heart come up. Nice. All right. And an apple. Great. All right. See some different reactions here. Great. Okay. Let me ask one last question here, and then I'll bring it back home to reality. What if from Austin to Washington, D.C., it was like the City Slicker tour? So we were going to stop at really nice restaurants and cocktail lounges and museums and check out all the national monuments. How many of you would want to get onto that bus? Okay, I see different people with different hearts and different. All right, I see a clapping. No, I see some thumbs down. All good. All right, so let me bring it back home. You guys were here to talk about product management and vision led. Here's the analogy that I'm trying to build here. Imagine for a second that the bus is your product. The passenger are your customers and your stakeholders are trying to get a sense of where all this is going. That final destination, whether it was San Francisco or Washington, D.C., that's your product vision. The route, the cities you're going to stop on between Austin and either Washington, D.C. or San Francisco, that's your product strategy. And then the daily itinerary is your product roadmap. These are the details. So if we went from Austin to DC, and the first day we were going to go between Austin and New Orleans, Louisiana, maybe we leave at 8 a.m. We're going to stop at this restaurant at noon, and then we're going to go to this cool coffee shop outside of New Orleans, and then we're going to eat dinner at this restaurant, and the hotel's around the corner, right? Those are the details that provide context, but it's all in the context of a longer term, like multi-day journey, right? And so this is the theory that we present and this concept behind vision-led product management, which is in order to establish yourself as a strong product leader, you have to make it clear where all this is going, as well as how you're going to get there. And so, we offer a couple, sort of like building on this analogy, is this quote, right? If you came to the fork in the road and you have no sense of where you're headed, then either of these paths can seem viable. And I think the way this manifests itself for products managers is like, you hear the idea from a customer or your own head or your internal stakeholders, and you're like, yeah, that does seem good. And if you have no sort of like guardrails or decision-making framework, then you might follow one path, not realizing that it's actually taking you further away from where you should go. And I think this becomes especially important if you're building enterprise products, because those customers, they may sign a 2 or 3 year contract with you. And if you don't have the product vision, that to me is the vacuum that creates sort of this space for them to ask for the random feature requests. And you're just like, wait, what? That's like not even close to anything we had told. But if they think about it from their perspective, they don't know where you're headed. They just know that this product doesn't do what they want it to do today. And I think this is an important sort of like part of selling the vision, because they are going to use your product for multiple years, and you have to have some sense of where things are going, because if you don't, they're going to fill those gaps, right? And so this is a visual that was in the book. I think we might have modified it a little bit. I think I added a couple of extra things as we started doing more talks after the book came out. But of course, like with most product management, you're looking into the future of what the future holds. For those who've read sort of chapter 3, that we talk first and foremost, and one of the first things we ask people to do as they're trying to implement the framework is say, okay, every business has sort of some metric of success of their product for product success that has a dollar sign in front of it. Start first with your customer outcome metric, right? What are they trying to accomplish? Why does it matter in their life? Because if you focus on that, as long as you've got a reasonable business model and pricing and packaging, all the other business outcomes should follow suit, right? And so once you have this metric and you understand for this persona, this is what we're trying to help them accomplish, this is why they care about it, this is why they're motivated, this is why it's important and urgent in their life. Now what we ask teams to do is say, okay, how do you 10x that outcome metric for them compared to what they have today, right? And for that, we talk about creating a vision in the format of what do you want your customer experience to look like at some point in the future? What is that journey going to look like? And think about why it would be exciting to them as a customer or a user, as well as why your internal stakeholders would be thrilled and excited to have it. So, we talk about this 10x concept sort of generically, but all of it is about creating a customer-centric vision, which is like, this is what we want our customers to experience at some point in the future. And then working backwards from that final destination to say, okay, so there's a bunch of things we don't have today that we would need in order for that vision to come to life. Here's how we're going to sequence that work and create the experience over time. There's this is the hard part, right? There's a lot of considerations of sort of like why one thing might come before another. And this, in the book, we kind of use the chuck wagon example as like sort of the culmination of all those different pieces put together. And then finally, there's sort of this roadmap. And I think the thing that I would say that gets into in chapter 6 in part 3 of the book was, hey, it's fine. I see a lot of companies who have visions and strategy documents, but they sit up at a shelf collecting dust because the product team is like in firefighting mode and they're just constantly reacting to like customer requests and tech debt and bugs and all this stuff. And you never make progress toward the vision. And so that was sort of why we introduced the roadmap balancing framework that says, hey, you need to think about what percentage of capacity should go towards making progress towards the vision versus like iterating on the existing product versus like, dealing with the operational requirements that come with modern SaaS platforms, right? Performance, security, uptime, tech debt, bugs, internal tooling, all those things. And, that's sort of the concept of the roadmap balancing framework. So I'll pause there and just see if that sparks any questions. It was a super high level overview. Obviously the book goes into a lot more detail and some of you might have some questions as you hear this, but.
Nice. Does someone have? Yeah, Ksenia?
I am Ksenia, and I have a few things I wanted to mention. I think the customer outcomes kind of having that as a focus instead of like your internal metrics that you use as the indicators of the value that the customer is getting is really awesome. I think that, like, for me, in a way, it was a bit of a reminder, and like this is. I will keep this in mind whenever I'm working. And I also really liked the balanced roadmap, like where you have allocations for innovation, for iteration, for the operations. I think this is really great, kind of like to keep all the balls in the air, kind of, instead of just focusing on one or at the expense of another. So like these are really key takeaways for myself from the book. Thank you for reminders there.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to hear that. And I think you're right on the balance of road mapping. We just realized that every product team is kind of juggling multiple things simultaneously. And it's basically impossible for you to be like, no, I'm not going to do any usability feedback right now. Like, please don't even give it to me. Like, what kind of person would succeed in a product management role, like with that level of like, no, right? And then, coming back to your first comment there, I think this is the most common problem, is that all the success metrics are tied around, business, revenue growth and ARR growth. And it flips the sort of like problem solving process, right? You're like, okay, what do I need to do to generate another $10 million in revenue over the next 2 years? Where like instead, if you just said, what are the problems that our customers would be willing to pay money for? And then let's think about let's prioritize those first and then start doing the business analysis afterwards. It changes the dynamic of the conversation, and it's really hard change to make. But the reality is, all the business metrics are lagging indicators of customer value creation. And so if, and some of you might remember the chart from probably chapter 3 or something, where we kind of showed how the product-driven organizations, their product team is thinking about how to sort of increase the sort of like share of wallet and value prop for customers into the future, knowing that sales and marketing have the operational responsibilities of just closing the deals for what is available in the market in the near term, right? But if the product team isn't 1 or 2 years ahead of sales and marketing, how are they going to sign up for, quotas next year? That would seem like impossible today, because the product is only creating so much value for customers. And so the idea is like that a product-driven organization, the product and design team typically that are the ones who are kind of 1 or 2 years ahead, thinking about what is the next wave of sort of like value creation. So those are sort of like the key concepts, but I'm glad that it was helpful.
Hey, Rajesh, it's Allison here.
Hey, Allison, good to see you.
Good to see you. So about that, I think that makes a lot of sense that, the product team should be focused on creating the customer value. And that's kind of more of a longer term thing rather than the short-term quarterly sales goals. What examples do you have where, people have been able to, product teams have been able to sort of manage up or get that concept across to, to leaders that are perhaps more focused on the quarterly results?
Yeah, Allison, it is a great question. And I guess the short answer is if it ain't broke, no one's going to want to fix it, right? So I think there has to be a triggering moment inside of an organization where from the top down, there's a desire to change the way that product management and product development happens. One of the reasons we spent, chapter 2 basically explaining the idea of what it means to be a product-driven organization before explaining the framework at all is that there's a lot of different ways that you can be a product-driven organization. And I think, we just present vision-led product management as one of many frameworks that could help you become more product-centric. But I think at the core of it, it really just encompasses two things: customer centricity and a deep understanding of customers by the people who are building the software, or whether that's product design, engineering, and then sort of like that triad. And then 2, a desire to create a scalable business, right? Because I think usually the triggering point at some organizations is, oh, shoot, we are in this cycle where sales just constantly brings the next feature that's going to close the next deal. And like, we're really never making it make progress, or like, it's all incremental, right? We'll have a straight line of growth, but we're looking for the hockey curve. And, in order to get that hockey curve, and the whole value of building a SaaS business is that one solution can serve lots and lots of customers' needs. And the hardest part, and we talked about this in chapter 2 with the product driven, it's a gamble that the company is willing to make, that we would build a team who can deeply understand the needs of so many different customers and be able to make the hard decision about what really matters to those customers and what doesn't, in order to create a single solution that's just good enough, right? And I think this is the other hard part about sort of like being a product-driven organization. You have to acknowledge that your product will never be the best thing in the world, and it's never going to check every single box. All you really have to do, though, is be better than all the alternatives out there in the market, right? And in that situation, customers have no other choice but to use your product, and they might grumble and they might sort of complain. And I think, the example I often think of here, Allison, is like, I think Apple made a really hard choice by going deep on the privacy side of things, right? They've ruffled a lot of feathers as they've sort of rolled out a lot of changes on the iOS and restricted how much apps can track what you're doing on websites and all those things. But to me, it was derived, and I don't know anything about their process. I'm not the Apple expert. There is something intrinsic when I hear about that. I'm like, yes, that is exactly the thing I want as a consumer, though, is like to protect my data and my privacy. And so they somehow realized it and built their entire product strategy around that being the direction that they're going to head. And it was unique and differentiated. And like, I think that's, it takes guts to be able to say, no, we're not going to go build and well, they did build better cameras and stuff, but that's like not the only thing they did, right? That they chose where their differentiation was going to come from. And that was a hard probably choice to make, because it was not common at all in the market to fight back against sort of the way that things work today. So.
Thanks.
Nice.
Can I also ask a question?
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to read your book yet, but what I wonder, to what extent do you communicate, because you're talking about roadmap, to what extent do you make it public and do you communicate it externally? And if so, what is in your view the best way to do so?
Yeah, it's a great question. Wow, it's been a year since we wrote the book, but there is a section,
there is, yes,
a whole section dedicated to this topic in particular. And Ben and I actually debated this a little bit. I think we have slightly different perspectives, but we are like, writing a book with someone else is a little bit harder. We're 90% in agreement on most things. So like, it wasn't like horrible. I feel like it actually is important. Depending on your business model, in enterprise in particular, I think you have to share the roadmap externally. And it sort of comes back to what I was talking about earlier. If you don't, they're going to fill the void with a bunch of random requests. And if you don't get them bought into the direction of the product and say, hey, today we do X, Y, and Z for you, we believe it would be incredibly valuable to you and all the rest of our customers if we also did these other things for you over the next, 2 or 3 years, or however timeline you want to sort of present. I think getting alignment at that level is like the fundamentals of it. And then, obviously there's going to be questions on timelines and but when is that thing going to come out? And I think, there's a art and a science here, right? Especially in collaborating with sales or marketing, and sort of how do you convey what is coming versus what's available today? Because, sales will always say, yeah, but I don't want to tell them what's coming without a hard deadline, because otherwise it'll just stall the deal. They won't, and to me, that's just a signal that the product today is not good enough, right? It's not meeting the needs of enough customers, or we're going after the wrong audience because the product was designed for these people, and sales and marketing is out here trying to sell to these people, right? And that's sort of the dot diagram that we use. But I think it is important to share some roadmap externally. Now, I think the level of fidelity and accuracy and how deadline driven it is up for debate. I think given the trend that I'm seeing, which is like the front running product teams starting to make the transition from like output oriented product development to outcome oriented product development, my sort of like recommendation would be to talk about what are the sort of metrics of success or other problem spaces that you intended to solve for customers in the near future, whether that's 1 or 2 years away, and make sure that they are aligned and that there's nothing else on their list where they're like, no, wait, what about this other thing that I really feel like you guys are positioned well to help us with, that no one else is helping us with? And I think sometimes you may take that as feedback and say, oh, we didn't even realize that was a problem. Maybe we need to do some more discovery work and figure out if other customers would agree. But I think the short answer is you have to share some of that stuff externally, especially in the enterprise space. Now, in the consumer space, no need, right? It's not like anyone downloads an app in the app store and is like, oh, I want to know what the roadmap looks like, right? In the consumer space, it's just like, does this thing work for me today or not? And if so, great, I'll use it. If not, okay, it'll just be one of 100 apps on my home screen that I never use, right?
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to ask you related to that, and I think especially indeed for a more B2B company, right? Because then I thought, if sometimes you are concerned or afraid of like what's going to happen when you show your roadmap, that also would mean that to a certain degree, you were not showing it or like communicating it, right? At least to like the biggest companies that maybe you are the ones most afraid of, oh, now that we'll have a deadline, right? So then I thought as well, indeed, in theory or ideally, they would see like, okay, yes, I remember we did an interview, right, a couple of weeks ago, you told me about this idea. So like, I more or less understand, let's say, your roadmap, right? So I would also see it a bit as that way, right? Maybe the roadmap is a bit more of formality, like, okay, you know, we were having a lot of discussions, interviews. Now this is what we believe we want to focus on, but ideally shouldn't be a surprise, right? At least with the main companies, let's say.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think if they are surprised when they see the roadmap, then either it's a signal that you haven't fully digested what their needs are, or that you've got the wrong solutions. And you know, sometimes it's either the prioritization of the problems that they're debating with you, or sometimes it's like, no, but that mock-up won't work for me for X, Y, and Z reasons, and it's more at the more solution level. And I think being able to parse out what are they really trying to provide feedback on is helpful. And I think, Carlos, the other thing I'll emphasize to me about the framework that we didn't explicitly call out there, as with any framework, to me, it's all about getting alignment, both internally and externally. And every sort of step that we present, we ask teams to do them sequentially, because at the foundation, if the success metrics are not agreed on, then the debates on prioritization are never going to end. And so we start with that as sort of like the foundation, which is, if you're not clear, who's this product for? What does success look like from a customer's perspective? What does it look like from a business metrics perspective? Then to me, that's like 90% of all debates on prioritization, is that sales thinks it should be all about like, the ability to close deals in the next 6 months. Customer success is all about improving NPS, and like products all about thinking about how to like address the next market. And so when you have that level of misalignment, it doesn't matter how many meetings you have, you're going to have sort of like foundational like debates that are never going to get resolved. And I think the point that I would make here is, the artifacts are intended to spark the discussion, to confirm alignment, because especially now with remote work becoming more common, it's not enough to have a verbal agreement that, yes, that's exactly who we're going to go after. I think you have to have something tangible that sort of like commemorates that decision and says, yes, so we all agree, these are the group of people we're going after. This is the problem we're trying to solve for them. And this is why our solution is going to win in the market. Therefore, here's our roadmap for what we're going to go build to like kind of continuously iterate or improve or launch the next innovation for them. And now here's all the artifacts that people can look at and like confirm, yes, I agree, that is exactly it. And I think the customer vision is another, the customer journey vision is another example. It's not enough to just say, yes, we're going to go solve that problem for people, and we have no idea how it's actually going to come to life. And it forces you to say, but what would they actually see on the screen in the SaaS solution, and why would they keep clicking on buttons inside of our product, right? And I think it's like a forcing function, really.
Yeah, indeed. Samir, I think, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Am I audible?
Yes, please. We can hear you.
So Rajesh, what I wanted to ask was that, there are a bunch of learnings that you've shared in the book. from a lot of roles that you've had in your career. What I wanted to understand was that now in as a sort of post-facto thing, do you think that all of the learnings that you've shared in the book were applicable to all the roles that you've had? Or is it that, not everything is applicable to every single role and you have to pick and choose and identify which ones are applicable to the product you're working on in the organization that you're working, instead of trying to sort of, force fit all of these learnings to the organization or the role that you're working in?
Yeah, Samir, it's a great question. I think to answer it directly, I think most of the case studies I presented myself are things that I've taken to every single product role. And so as I learned them, it was like, painful lesson learned in most of the cases where I was like, shoot, I probably should take this forward. And I think it shaped who I am as a product manager. And so I think the order in which they happened is helpful. I think one of the hardest things about building frameworks is to think about how to generalize concepts so that they could be applicable in different situations. And the reality of why we exist as sort of like an advisory and coaching firm is that we help tailor the framework to the situation of the company stage, the market dynamics, the sort of like existing solution, the competitive landscape, all of those things, because the reality, unfortunately, with product is like, it kind of does depend. I think some of the most critical things that influence what product best practices should apply or not, I actually feel like the business model is probably one of the most important things, whether you have a D2C or a marketplace or a B2B2C or just straight B2B. I think that sort of shapes in the dynamics of product management and the challenges that come with it, and the sort of like best practices is more than anything else. As a tactical example, I think D2C is by far the hardest type of product management because you have to synthesize the needs of like hundreds of thousands of potential customers into a single product. And like, that's really hard to do and scale and keep them engaged when people have like very short attention spans and things like that. And therefore you need a special type of skill set in that space. And the sort of like frameworks are going to be very specific to like, scalability and like understanding needs of lots of disparate segments of people and deciding how to prioritize them against each other. And I think on the other side of the spectrum, like B2B selling to the Fortune 1000, like that's a whole nother skill set, right? In that situation, I think more tactically, you have to acknowledge that you're not Netflix. Your product will be custom, and that's okay. And you just have to acknowledge that there are some special things, one-off things that you're going to do to close deals, single sign-on, implementation, integrations, all those things. And you just have to be I think transparent with stakeholders as well. Like, how scalable is this product going to actually be? How one-off versus like standardized is it going to be? And I think that's the thing that sort of like, to me, dictates when certain frameworks are helpful and relevant and certain not.
Thanks a lot. And if I may just sort of add on to that question a bit further. Yeah. So do you also feel that in all of these scenarios, we should look at the maturity level of the current organization that we're working in? Because out of all the principles that you've shared in the book, some might be applicable straight away, but others might have to follow, let's say, a sequential order that, let me first implement these first few things to set a solid foundation, and then grow on top of that to apply these additional few things.
Yeah, I think it's very critical to recognize the culture and the environment under which you're operating. And I think the most important question, assuming everyone here is in the product management or interested in it, what is the role of product management at that organization? And taking a step back and answering that question, because I think that'll dictate how you approach the sort of product management space. Look, at certain organizations, and I've been, hey, just dumb luck that I happened to go work for Ben at OPower, and he came from Marty Kagan's school of thought and worked with him at eBay and brought sort of a product mindset. And the product management team had a very specific role, and it was pretty strategic, right? I've also worked at organizations where product management has been a little bit more on the delivery side, right? It leans a little bit more into the project management side of things, and that was sort of the role. So I think it's helpful to acknowledge sort of what is the role of product at the organization, and ask yourself, is that the type of role that you want to be in? And I think, look, career paths change rapidly these days. People work at lots of different organizations, and I think you can learn something at every company that you're at. And honestly, if you're in a role that's, you feel like a little bit more focused on execution, that is not a skill set to be sneezed at. I think a lot of people underestimate how easy or how hard it is to ship great product experiences, digital experiences like sprint over sprint or release over release. not easy at all. And I think execution is, an important skill set for every product manager. But so yeah, I think that understanding that recognition of the culture, one of the things we've started thinking more about is like kind of building on that chapter 2 and understanding that kind of what I was alluding to earlier when Allison was asking the question of like, what are some situations where like this type of transition or this framework can be helpful. I think it has to be that there's motivation to change. And, for those of you, for those of you who read the book, I sort of geek out on behavioral science. BJ Fogg has this sort of the behavioral model, and he talks a lot about how motivation comes in waves. And I think one of the important things to recognize is whether the organization is at a moment where something broke and something does need to change about how product development works and how they think about building the right product for the right market. And those are the moments where something like the framework are most relevant, because now it provides sort of a pathway and a sort of like set of an end state vision of what the organization could look like and how you can actually implement some of these concepts along the way. But I think the first step 100% is to just acknowledge where you are today.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Nice. Someone else has any other questions or comments?
I just wanted to say, because so I come to quite a few of these, as you know, Carlos. I read a lot of the books. I don't actually have any questions, I think, because it was so well set out. Like all my questions would be like, oh, how do you apply it? But then you covered that in the book. So I just wanted to say I really appreciated the book. I really appreciated that bus analogy that you just gave us.
Yeah.
But yeah, and sorry, my daughter's trying to join in, a budding product manager.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. It's really good. It's definitely changed how I've been looking at my teams and my roadmaps and what I've been doing. So thank you. That's it from me.
Thank you, Phil. You have no idea how much that means as an author, and like, how much time we poured into this last year and thinking about how to present it. There's nothing more meaningful to me to hear that it actually helps someone think about, change how they think about product and hopefully help build better products for your customers and your users.
Awesome. Someone else, any feedback, comments? Otherwise, I had one that I was thinking, and that I usually also think when coming into a new team, especially, I think sometimes teams indeed are working and are like delivering so much and so fast, right? But then you come and you see like there's no vision or no clear outcome or no clear metric, all these things from the book. And then, it takes time, right? Like you said, right? Just defining what is that one outcome or that one metric, right? Takes time until you have something that you can trust, right? Because otherwise you can propose any outcome, but maybe, it's not that reliable, right? My question is, and then, so the first thing is, of course, try to convince or align the team that, do we all agree we need a vision? Do we all agree that we need to define this outcome and this, right? You convince them, and then again you have a bit of this preparation time, but again you have developers, the designers, everyone sort of like already running. Do you have any like suggestion, tips, like what do you do in that time while you are preparing the vision? Because I usually feel like, okay, we keep doing things and like, okay, what if at the end it's not aligned with what we end up, right? So I always feel a bit like, okay, what can I do? Like what can we change? What can we not do maybe?
Yeah, Carlos, it's a great question, because I think one of the questions is sort of like, how would you roll this out if you really liked what you saw in the book? And I think the reality is, honestly, some of our clients, it would take 5 to 8 months for this process to roll out, because there's a lot to do, especially if like customer discovery has not been part of their process. Then one of the first things we ask them to do is go talk to like a lot of like buyers, prospects, users, and all those things to start feeding in there. And so I think, to answer your question, I think you can start small, right? So you've got the existing roadmap or things that are happening in the sprint. I think first off, like you said, there's a question on whether the need for an updated vision or strategy is relevant. And the reality is, like we talked about, there's a time and a place even for this framework. I think if you're just launching a new product, what we've seen with early stage startups, and we've worked with a handful of them, they're so focused on just getting the first version out the door and finding product market fit that the idea of having sort of a multi-year vision is totally irrelevant, except during fundraising time, where they then have to explain to investors why this can grow into a big business, right? So like 90% of their efforts just figuring out like how to iterate on the feedback they're getting and figure out where are we seeing the early traction and like how do I respond to the feedback and hopefully as they're responding to the feedback, they're not just building the thing, but like learning something about the customer's sort of like workflow and situation and problem space, prioritization sort of like framework in their head and those types of things, right? So I think the reality is you may also need to think about where are you in the product life cycle, and you know if you found product market fit, you know, as we talk about in the book, in that roadmap balancing framework, 70% of your time might be all operational, which is like, oh shoot, we're going to have a lot more users. We need to think about scalability, and like now we're going to get a lot more data, so we need to make sure our like privacy is in order and much better at the next level than from where we were before, right? At that time, the vision like kind of is irrelevant, right? You're sort of in an operational tactical mode, and that's fine, and that's relevant, that's appropriate given the product lifecycle stage you're in. I think the key thing to think about is like, are we kind of coming to that like top of that S curve of innovation where we're like, okay, we've squeezed all the value out of this existing product that we can, and we need to start thinking about what's next for our customers so they don't feel like we're stagnating and just like nothing's changed about our product in like 5 years and they're wondering what we're up to. And meanwhile, we're just like trying to like keep up with the operational needs and things like that. So I think there's that balancing act that could happen. I think the other thing that I think a lot about is the Scrum process, honestly, in particular. And it feels to me like there's a very big focus on making sure that engineering is always busy and they feel like, you know, that you're getting the money's worth because they're like, they're expensive and they're hard to recruit. And like, you know, and that, you know, I don't think you can take anything away with that. But I do worry that product teams then, it forces sort of this mini waterfall process where like product is ahead of design and then they hand something to design and hand something to engineering. And it's because, oh, I don't want to bother the engineers. I need to make sure that they're always shipping something because that's otherwise people will wonder what we're doing over here in product development. What I worry about is how do you pull the engineers into the discovery process so that they themselves can firsthand hear about the sort of like problem space and think about help you shape the vision, because they often look engineers are problem solvers at their core, right? And I think that they're a great partner. Same with design, right? How do you move more in step as opposed to creating the mini waterfall, especially with something as important as shaping the direction and strategy to realize? And I think having design, you know, engineering there to help say this is hard to do, this would be easy to build, and like brainstorming solutions with you is great. Same with design, right? They've got some unique insights and they know what would be the right solution in the right situation and stuff. But when you play the game of telephone with context, some of those insights might get lost and you kind of like not taking advantage. So I think the question is, can you carve off 10% of engineering's time during the course of a sprint to come join you on some discovery work? It seems like a reasonable ask. It's not like 80% of their time, but like some portion of their time is working with you on sort of like discovery on the product side.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Tim, I think you have a question.
Yeah, can you hear me right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Rajesh, nice to meet you. We've been chatting over LinkedIn. Love the book. It was the first product book that I read, and it's been super helpful in my current role. The next book that I've been reading, or space that I've been figuring out, is this whole product-led growth area. And so my question is, like when you look at the landscape of all these different techniques, how does something like product-led growth, you know, tools like like Dropbox and Miro, where it's super easy and sticky to like just get on the platform and then start sharing. I'm trying to figure out how a concept and technique like product-led growth fits into your book, your strategy, and all the methods and techniques that you describe. Because, you know, as a new product person, there's like a ton of shit out there to learn and see. And I'm like trying to figure out how all these fit together. So in your expert opinion, is this just a technique, or how does it fit into the greater philosophy picture?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. So I think the thing I'll call out is at the core of the framework is just, to me, is more about product leadership and setting a direction that people can get inspired by and excited by, and having some customer data that proves that it's actually the right direction to go, and getting buy-in and alignment. That to me applies regardless of what your market is and your product and your business and all those things, right? I think what you're asking about is an important question. I still think about it, and actually, I don't know, maybe I'll bring this slide up because this is another one I'm just about to sort of like talk through. But to me, it has to do with the business goals you have set. And I think if you thought forward, whatever your projections say, I think the question to ask is how many customers are we expected to serve over that time period? And what is the sort of like ACV, or how much money is each customer paying us? As we talk, and I think what that has to do with is the scalability of your product, right? So in the consumer space, you might have hundreds of thousands or millions of users, and therefore, and each one is paying you like whatever, $10 a month. And so, you might have to, then I think the question that arises is like, oh, but how would you scale that business? I can't hire like 100,000 people that like are the sales reps for every single person on my user base, right? I have to use a strategy like product-led growth, where it's super easy for the end user to figure out what package is right for them, upgrade if they want to, downgrade if they want to, and sort of like, minimize the sort of the cost to serve, but also make sure that we're creating value. I think where I see product-led growth coming up more is that a lot of businesses these days, instead of selling to the Fortune 500, they're starting to sell into the SMB market, right? And I think that's becoming more common, that people have realized that the SMBs, poor SMBs have sort of been neglected in sort of digital transformation. And I think it's very relevant in that market, right? So we use HubSpot. I just did a talk yesterday with a VC, with a kind of a VC partner to their portfolio companies. We use HubSpot. I think HubSpot is a great example of product-led growth, where like, I was interested in doing something in HubSpot, and they made it super clear when I clicked on the feature that it was a locked feature, and they brought the pop-up for like how to upgrade to unlock that feature. And immediately in 10 seconds, I saw the screenshot of what I would get if I hit the button. I clicked on the button and I could see the packages and sales things. And I think that's only relevant if, HubSpot had said, we're going to have 200,000 SMB customers, and each one is only going to pay us like, 4,000, 5,000, 10,000 a year. Therefore, we couldn't justify having like an enterprise sales team, right? That those people would never be able to bring a paycheck home. They would have to sell so many deals that it wouldn't make sense for them, right? And so I think it has to do with really the scalability. And I think product-led growth is a great example of what I would say is a way to become a product-driven organization, is that you think about technology as the means of scaling your business and delivering a great customer experience along the way.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
For sure.
Nice. Other questions or comments from someone else?
Yeah, a little bit of a different one. So when you've got to a solid vision, you've got everyone to buy into it, and you started to work towards it, have you encountered, and how would you deal with teams that start to interpret it slightly different and therefore start to deviate away from it?
Yeah. So one, I think the question to ask is it an appropriate deviation, right? Did they have some insight that led them down a slightly different path from what the vision was? And I think it's worth sort of like doing the deep dive there. Hey, did they talk to a handful of customers or users and realize that the vision was slightly off, right? So I think it's a question of like, is the vision off, or did they not agree? Did they not actually buy into it? And I think sometimes that's sort of like the core of it. I think the reality is, and we talk a little bit about it in chapter 8 on the process side of things, is like, hey, it's a living and breathing artifact, just like the software is and your product is, right? And so hopefully it's locked down for the most part and doesn't change drastically on a regular cadence, but you might have to tweak the vision once in a while. And I think the key thing that would drive you to tweak the vision is, there's a few trigger points, right? A major market shift, like sort of the pandemic last year, probably changed strategies, especially for like healthcare companies and other, that was a market shift, or sort of like out the external source. New insights from customers or prospects, right? I think sometimes there's also a realization like, oh shoot, we've kind of tapped this market or segment out. We need to think about where the next wave of growth for our company is going to come from. And therefore we need to update the vision, because we need to go after a different market, and we need to like think about where we want to go to. So I think those are the things I'd be looking for if you sort of saw that there was one team who sort of is deviating. And the other thing I'll just say is like, look, while we are kind of prescriptive and saying like, look, have a mock-up and a comic strip that explains what you want your customer experience to look like, and the ones that we presented are pretty polished, they weren't intended to be sort of like, go build this and tell me how it goes. They were intended to be concrete enough that people could react and say, oh, I don't think that this person would feel that feeling at this moment in their customer journey. And I want to talk to you about whether this is actually the right sort of direction, or whether they would keep going in our customer experience or not, right? And the mock-ups are intended to be a little bit more tangible, which is like, no, there's one language that every single person at an organization, sales, marketing, customer success, engineering, UX, design, product know, and is they can look at a screen of what the customer experience is going to look like and provide feedback. And so the reason we chose that as the sort of like vehicle of getting alignment is that it's a language that everyone speaks. Not everyone knows how to read business epics or like interpret Jira into like a meaningful way, right? And so we sort of like boil it down to the common denominator and said like, look, this is an artifact and it's intended to spark debate and alignment, but it's all about making sure that there's alignment. So I think, you know, that's probably what I'd be thinking about if you felt like there was a team that was deviating.
Cool, thank you.
Yep.
Someone else, any other questions or comments? I agree with what you mentioned, Rajesh. I think indeed, right? A lot of the times when I also propose a frame or something, people sometimes ask, but is this the best one we can use or we should use, right? And I also say, probably not, but at least we're going to start discussing and knowing if we're on the same page or not, right? Then we can think if there's a better framework. But indeed, I think just having that, let's all align, right? I think especially like with outcomes, for example, I think when there is no official one, everyone believes that, yeah, I think we're all on the same page. But when you start writing it down, then you realize like, oh, wait, no, I don't think that's where we should go, right?
Yeah, and I think that's it. It's the same as like talking to a customer versus showing them a mock-up, right? When there's something tangible for them to react to, then you get different feedback than if you're just trying to understand their business goals and like their workflows or whatever, right?
Yeah. I'm curious to hear maybe Senia or like the others, like what artifacts have you used for vision? Because for example, I wasn't aware of this one of the, like, I don't remember the exact name, not the comic strip, but like an agenda that I was like, oh, this one is very nice because I can do it, right? Because the comic strip was like, oh, this is very nice, but then, okay, maybe I need someone to draw it. But then I saw the other one is literally, I could just do it on a Google Doc and write it down, of course, with the research. But so that's one I want to do for my team. But yeah, I was curious to hear the others, if they had any.
I saw like once one of the products like a separate team was working on, they had created a video with like the end state of this division basically, yeah, like showing how easy it will be to use the product and so on. That was really nice to kind of rally people around this vision.
Yeah, I forgot. I don't think we ever linked from the book, but or I don't even remember if we put this graphic in there, but I did a blog post a while back on 8 ways to express a product vision. I'll send it here. And then if anyone wants to ask me questions about it later. I saw some good examples and I think all of them are good. And the reality is like, honestly, anything is better than nothing, or anything is better than the verbal sort of communication that has historically been like, it's almost like folklore, right? It's just like, oh yeah, I heard it from the CEO one time and now I've interpreted. The problem is all the interpretations vary over time and everyone has a different version of what they think they heard. And so, but yeah, I think having something on paper, honestly, is like 90% of like the value.
Yeah, indeed. Nice. I think there was one question.
I was just going to echo the video. So we built a video that was like just a direction of where we were going, but it was so useful to get people really excited. And what was really interesting was the things people got excited about weren't the things we thought they would. And so we're like, all right, that thing's really easy. We can build that tomorrow. And so go away and build that. And it sort of changed direction a little bit. But yeah, really useful.
Yeah, it's funny how that's sort of like concrete thing for people to react to and elicits a lot of good feedback.
Yeah, indeed. Nice. Someone else, any other example on, yeah?
No, I had a question.
Yeah, please.
I like the example with American Express on the generating new customer outcomes. Do you have any other examples?
Yeah, I think Ben and I debated that one. So mine is Amazon Prime, and I don't know if it works the same in every country, but like, when I first signed up for Amazon Prime, all I cared about was getting free 2-day shipping on all the physical products I was buying off of Amazon. And then later they added Prime Video that kind of helps me achieve like a relaxation or entertainment outcome. They added Prime Music where like, Alexa will play music for my kids and it's kind of another entertainment outcome and things like that. So I think Amazon Prime is a good one. The price went up a little bit, but to me, it wasn't proportionate to the amount of value that they created afterwards.
Thank you.
Nice. Any other comments or feedback?
I think I'd just add the video. We've also done that, and it's really, really effective. I know, it's just echoing what people are saying. I feel like a fanboy in this one. I haven't asked any questions other than just to praise it.
Nice. Tim, did you want to make a question? No? No? Okay, no worries. That's okay to listen. Yeah, indeed. I've seen videos or something, because sometimes when you have a document as well, sometimes it's like, okay, if it's more than a page, probably I won't look at it, right? So a slide or a one pager, a video indeed also works very well. I've seen that in several locations.
I think senior stakeholders particularly, they spend so long in Excel documents looking at numbers or reading strategy decks, or then PowerPoint, death by PowerPoint. So I think the video really helps you step out of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think indeed on the book, you also recommend, when trying to discuss the vision, to also do like this, stepped out physically, right, from the office, to try to also, indeed, not be attached to this day to day, and really try to think more long term, right?
Yeah, just create that environment and open space to not like get Zoom, kind of stuff. Obviously, much harder now with COVID, but I think even asking people to like go to a different room, or like do some very different formats of it, sort of like using breakout rooms or whatever, and do some things that are very uncommon for your things, just so that it feels like we're in a different mindset and we're thinking about the future and our customers and the market and trends and all those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
For those that have done this video idea, I'm curious what the format was. Was it like going through a prototype, or was it a short video, long video? What sort of tools did you use?
So I can talk to our one. So my designer and I took all the stuff about we wanted to do. It was like a 3-year vision, and we basically built the mobile experience that we wanted to have, based upon the insight that we had from the customers and where we saw the market going. So it was about 3 minutes long, and it showed them kind of entering the site, the things they did on the site, what their experience would be. And it was used as the talking point was, we don't know if we'll ever get here. We don't even know if this is the right place to go, but this is what the intent is. And it went really nicely. So it was just a high fidelity prototype that we then recorded the interactions on.
Oh, sorry, go for it, Senya. Senya, do yours.
It was like an animated video, like with kind of main points and the main basically outcomes, not any precise like mock-ups, nothing like that. So that worked too.
See, ours was specific features, but that we want to build over the next 3 or 4 years. But ours was actually presented to the board of directors, where they don't have the digital literacy is really low. So if you say something like native payments, they don't understand. But if you show someone paying with Apple Pay on an app, they understand. So we used it for that, but I had to caveat it with product discovery at the start, going, we might not build all this stuff. We haven't validated the customer problems. This is a vision piece. So it's heavily caveated.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Nice. I'm looking at the time. Maybe we can also take a picture now before people start dropping. For the ones that have the book, if you also want to appear on camera, you can just turn on your camera. I've had the digital one. I think you cannot see that well, but all right, 3, 2, 1. Awesome. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, Rajesh, for answering all the questions. I think you put already there your contacts, right? So I think it's okay for people to reach out to you. Again, thanks very much. Very useful. The book, very easy to go through. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for having me. Really enjoyed it. I'll ask one last favor. If you really loved it, an Amazon review would be amazing. Ben and I would really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. See
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.